Well, thank you for having us back into your home. We are so glad to be with you today. We have one of those really extraordinary and exciting stories. Um, One of the things that we really are passionate about in our ministry is that there is this thing called faith. Faith is an action, it is a verb that brings you into an affirmative relationship with Christ, with the Father, with the Holy Spirit. When you exercise faith, it is a willingness to say yes to God, as you've heard us say previously, no matter what the rest of the world thinks. Now, we are going to look at an extraordinary story here in a few minutes. This story is about a man that is going to find himself in the very presence of Christ as his only hope. So I'm going to say in advance that this man comes in front of Jesus simply as an act of faith because he has no other help on the planet. There is nothing or no one who is able to help him to find freedom from his bondage. It's an exciting story, and I hope you enjoy it. I want to go to our picture that Sherry brings us. The flamingos, these are not necessarily in the wild. They are in the zoo in Sacramento. And our granddaughter is, well, she was with us, and just what an extraordinary opportunity to see flamingos. And by the way, our last closing picture, you will get a sense of their habitat because the reeds that they are walking around in are over 6 feet tall. So I hope you enjoy that one as well. So thank you, Sherry, for bringing us this extraordinary picture. Let's get into our story. So Mark's gospel is a gospel for extraordinary times. In this story, Jesus is going to meet a possessed young man and send him off in his ministry. So, the story. Jesus does spiritual healing. Okay? The result of spiritual healing in his ministry challenges you and I to enter into our ministry. Now, the unusual story of a man who was terrifying the community, he was wearing chains, he was doing self harm, he was bloody, yelling and screaming, he was intimidating everyone around him. He, after all, was just the community demoniac. And then he met Jesus one day. Now, if you remember in our story, Jesus had just had a massive crowd. He gets in a boat and goes across the lake. As they're moving across the lake, they encounter this huge storm. The disciples, and this is really, really important part of the story, the disciples suddenly discover that they really don't know who Jesus is. And at the end of Mark chapter 4, they say, "Who is this man?" I want you to remember that point. It's very, very important. Now, on the east side of the lake where Jesus is going to, he's going there to get rest because there's no crowds. There's mostly unbelievers and the practice of local pagan religion in the neighborhood. There's some local Jewish folks as well, but not many. And here Jesus sought rest from the crowds. But remember, all of those boats on the lake are still following him as he arrives here. Mark chapter 5, verse 1. The Gerasene demoniac. They came to the other side of the sea, into the country of the Gerasenes. In verse 2, when he got out of the boat, immediately a man from the tombs with an unclean spirit met him, and he had been dwelling among the tombs, and no one was able to bind him any more, even with a chain. So I want you to see something important in this story. The demoniac is preoccupied with death because he is living among the tombs. Make note of how Satan dehumanizes us when he is able to take control of our lives. More than that, he was not subject to anyone else's authority at all. And there was no one who was able even to bind him up, even with chains. Let's continue. Because he had often been bound with shackles and chains, and the chains had been torn apart by him, and the shackles were broken in pieces, and and no one was strong enough to subdue him. Now, I want to point something out really interesting here. Whether he was just an extraordinarily physical specimen or whether he had supernatural powers, I'm going to leave that up to you. But the story says that there was no one who was able to subdue him. He just simply was a law unto himself. And I find that to be a very important observation here. Because here is a person that you could argue was completely out of control, who lived in an ongoing constant rage, an ongoing need to intimidate every human being, and he had no peace, none whatsoever. He's an extraordinary person, isn't he? He's a person who's dealing with extraordinary problems that are bigger than what he is able to handle. It says in verse 5 that constantly, night and day, he was screaming among the tombs and in the mountains, and he was gashing himself with stones. Here he is doing self-harm. Now, I just want to point out that this demonic influence on the life of this man causes him to do abuse to his own flesh. Make note of that. I think it's a very important thing that in Mark telling this story wants us to see this man in the entirety in which he is able to write and communicate the situation. Now when we come to verse 6, he's going to meet Jesus. It reads, seeing Jesus from a distance. Now, just put this into perspective. He sees him from far away. He ran up and bowed down before him. Now, what do you make of this? What do you think was his need? Why did he come and bow down before him? No one has ever been able to subdue this man. And here is this phenomenal moment that people are witnessing something that is so extraordinary, so unusual for this particular individual, and he finds himself in the very presence of the Son of God. What was his greatest need? And maybe we're seeing that here. Now in verse 7, shouting with a loud voice. Now where is he? He's kneeling in front of Jesus. So he's not just talking in a normal voice like I am. He is shouting with a loud voice, and he screams, if you would, what business do we have with each other? Jesus, Son of the Most High God. Now, remember the disciples saying, who is this man? Now we come to a man who is possessed with a demonic spirit, in fact, multiple spirits. And I want you to notice that the demonic presence in this man immediately recognizes Jesus as the Son of God. Whereas the disciples are still not sure who he is. That is an important part of this story. I cannot stress to you the importance of, do you know who Jesus is? Does your faith bring you into a personal encounter with him? Now, I also want to point out something else, a little note here at the bottom of your screen. Who is in control of his voice? I have no doubt that the man would like to say something to Jesus, but notice he has no control over this whatsoever. Something else is in control of his voice. Now, this is what Jesus had to say about it. For he had been saying to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." Now, there's stories in the New Testament where the disciples go around and try to cast out demons, and they discovered there are people they cannot get the demon out of. And what did Jesus say to them? Some of these only come out with fasting and prayer. Now, I have known individuals, pastors, evangelists, people who claim to be able to cast out demons, and in most cases, the ones I have known pretty soon see a demon behind everything. And every person is like, oh my goodness, when you come to the point where you're trying to cast out the demon allergy, I think you are struggling with a particular problem. But notice the authority with what Jesus speaks. You and I are not Jesus. Jesus has the authority to command and ask this unclean presence, multiple demons if you would, come out of the man, you unclean spirit. That's powerful language. In verse 9, he was asking him, that's Jesus is asking the man, what is his name? Now, does he want to know the name of the man kneeling before him? I think he does. But I want you to notice that the man still does not have control of his voice. And the demon said to him, "My name is Legion, for we are many." So this man has allowed Satan and his demons simply to take possession of him. And not just a demon, I'm talking legion. Hundreds and hundreds. This is an extraordinary story. And the unclean spirits, it says, and he began to implore Jesus earnestly, "Do not send them out of the country." Now there was a large herd of swine feeding nearby on the mountain. Now, I want you to think about this. The demons are asking him to not send them out of the country. And Mark writes, because he is a witness, there was a large herd of swine feeding nearby on the mountain. Verse 12, the demons implored him, saying, "Send us into the swine so that we may enter them." And Jesus gave them permission. I want you to think about one thing in this story. I want you to think about the disciples. I want you to think about the man, that anyone on those boats who happened to see this event, because this happened immediately, remember that word, as they got out of the boat. So there are witnesses here. What does it mean that Jesus gave them permission? Understand the incredible spiritual authority Jesus has. When he speaks, things happen. When he says to you, "I love you," things happen. When he says to you, "If you will give me your life, I will take it and give it back to you brand new," things happen. And something is about to happen to this man that is so radical, that is so encouraging, so hopeful, so powerful, that to that early church in Rome, this would give strength to people to meet a Jesus who had the power over darkness. But for you and I, in this moment, where you are seated or standing, you are meeting a Jesus who has authority and power over darkness. The darkness may be even in your own life. And that is remarkable. In verse 13, and coming out, the unclean spirits entered the swine, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the sea, about 2,000 of them. Remember legion? hundreds and hundreds, 2,000 of them. That's how many demons entered the pigs, by the way. And they were drowned in the sea. Put yourself there in that audience for a moment. What would you have just witnessed? It's extraordinary, isn't it? Now, this part I find fascinating. I kind of enjoy this part. Their herdsmen ran away and reported it in the city and in the country, and the people came to see what it was that had happened. This is like the biggest thing that has happened on the east side of the lake that you could ever imagine could have happened. And the people are rushing now to see what has happened. Now, I'm thinking about the young man here for just a moment. What an incredible day for him. Can you just imagine what it is like for him? Think about the scars on him. Think about the chains. Think about all of the things of being out of his mind, not having control of his words, his voice, his body. Think about the destruction that Satan desires to inflict upon a human being. Any one of us, if you would. And all the people are rushing to see exactly what happened. They came to Jesus and observed the man who had been demon-possessed sitting down. Thank goodness somebody put clothes on him. He is clothed and in his right mind. The very man who had the legion. Was there applause? Was there joy? Did they rush up and hug him? Did they say, welcome back to us? Welcome, we're so glad you're here. The phrase I did not read to you yet, right there on the screen. It reads, and they became frightened. It's interesting they didn't have joy. It's interesting they didn't embrace this man. It's interesting that they had fear. The audience, the witnesses now, all the neighbors are there. And in the other gospel where the disciples had headed off in another direction, they had come back. They were a bit intimidated. The boat filled with people following through the storm, they are there. I want you to think about the audience, the witnesses, if you would. And Mark records them all there. And now you and I are there. And we're watching this story unfold from the Word of God itself, the living Word. Verse 16. Those who had seen it described to them how it had happened to the demon-possessed man and all about the swine. And they begin to implore him to leave their region. Now, just think about this for a moment. We want you to leave. Go get in your boat and just leave us alone. Do you know people who want nothing to do with Jesus? More often than not, they want nothing to do with Jesus because of the Christians they happen to have known in their lifetime. And I'm sorry to even suggest that as a possibility, but that has been true for most of the people I've ever talked to. They just want nothing to do with us as Christians. And maybe they have a good reason. But what do you suppose their reason is here? To want Jesus to leave their region immediately. The reaction of the community reflects the culture of this area, first of all. They saw the financial impact that resulted from Jesus' actions in setting this man free. Now, if you had 2,000 swine today, 2,000 pigs going to the market, that is a sizable amount of money. And think of all the people it took to take care of 2,000 swine. Talk about jobs. All of a sudden, well, you know, Jesus, you're costing us jobs. Rather than joy, they felt fear and anger, but this is not an unusual response. They saw the financial impact, and it caused them to want nothing to do with him. Is that not a fascinating story? Does that not have implications? Very important ones for us to ponder. What does that mean for you and me? Now, I also want you to notice Jesus honoring that request. Remember, he's coming here to get rest. Notice what it says here in verse 18. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed was imploring him that he might accompany him. He's saying, Master, would you let me go with you? I want to sit at your feet and learn. I want to be submitted to you. And verse 19, are you ready for this? And Jesus did not let him. But instead he said to him, Go home to your people and report to them what great things the Lord has done for you, and how he had mercy on you. Now, here's what strikes me about this. This is a profound story of beginning personal ministry for this man. He didn't say, come sit with me for the next 2 years and I will prepare you to be a disciple. He said, you go today, right now, and you share what you have experienced, what you have seen, what you have heard. Go share this with your people. They need to hear it. That, to me, is profound. I know so many people who said, you know, I can't go out and do Bible studies. I can't go out and do personal ministry. I can't go out and I just want to say this story is so beautiful because he says, just simply go and tell what the Lord has done for you and how he had mercy on you. And I'm going to say that every single Christian has this same story in some way or another. The faith experience that brings you to an encounter with Christ is a life-changing experience for you. Because Christ comes into your life and he continually heals and makes changes and grows you into the men, women, and children he called you to be. This is a profound story of the beginning of that ministry. I just want you to understand how powerful this is. I don't know how many classes we've taught on how to give Bible studies and how to share Jesus with people. You know, here's the gospel presentation, learn the gospel presentation. Did you notice that Jesus doesn't give him a gospel presentation to share? He just says, go and tell. Go and tell. And you say, well, I don't have anything to tell. Then go meet Jesus again and say, Jesus, give me something to tell about who you are and what you've done in my life. Let that devotional experience in your life empower your personal ministry. Because you do have something to tell. Maybe you've forgotten it. Maybe it's been so many years. Maybe you need a fresh encounter with Jesus that sets you free from bondage of sin. Maybe you need to share how saying yes to Jesus has given you comfort and peace and quietness. I want to share another text with you. This is 1 John, his letter to the church. In John chapter 1, verses 1 to 3, here's what John wrote, saying the very same thing. What was from the beginning, what we have heard, what we have seen with our eyes, what we have looked at and touched with our hands concerning the word of life. And the life was manifested, And he's talking about the life of Christ manifested in your life. And we have seen and testify and proclaim to you the eternal life which was with the Father and was manifested to us. Verse 3, what we have seen and heard we proclaim to you also, so that you too may have fellowship with us. And indeed, our fellowship is with the Father and with his Son, Jesus Christ. Oh my goodness, isn't that beautiful? Isn't that just profoundly simple? Doesn't that just say, you know what? This whole thing about sharing Christ is, you don't need a master's degree. You don't need a bachelor's degree. You don't need an AA degree. You just need to have an encounter with Jesus. So that's what John is saying. That's what Jesus is saying. Look at the truth behind this story. So we're going to go to verse 20 now. He went away and began to proclaim in Decapolis what great things Jesus had done for him. And everyone was amazed. And by the way, that whole community later came out and accepted Christ. And he was able to come and minister powerfully to them. We can get caught up in the amazing things about demons and everything because that is pretty intriguing. But what is the point of the story? Take away from it what you have seen and what you have heard, and go and share it. The best and most powerful way to reach out to others is to know who Jesus is to you, to know he has changed your life, and to share the hope that you have. Well, here's our picture. Thank you for taking time with us today. Thank you, Sherry. Have a blessed rest of your day.